Hiya VC. Yes, I think you've got the idea of what's going to be coming up in this video. Anyway, so at the moment there seems to be a bit of a 90s vibe going around the VC. I've noticed a few videos coming up. Vulnerable Trigger, I think it's got one. I've just watched Dean on Grandma's Handbag do another one. And I think it was all started by, was it Grunge Finland? Is that the channel's name? I haven't subscribed yet. I'm going to. Talking about grunge albums. I haven't watched his video yet. I should really get down and do it. But yeah, there seems to be a 90s vibe going on, and it's based on that grunge thing. Now, believe it or not, I have had a video brewing for at least 3 weeks. It's been... I've just wanted to listen to the songs, well, the albums again, and I've got a ton of stuff to go through on this one. I had the idea of doing some videos where I kind of theme like CDs from the 90s together. So hopefully I'll get some more done as well. I've got some other ideas on. But what I realised, I went back and listened to one of these albums again, and I realised, there was a bit of a thing going on at Sub Pop, possibly Sub Pop, sort of in the alt rock sphere in the early 90s, and it was kind of bringing in more funk and soul and R&B elements to a lot of more standard grunge type stuff. It wasn't massive. There weren't loads of bands doing it, but I thought I'd tie together 3 bands that did seem to be doing it. And apart from the connection with the R&B, the soul, the funk being an influence, the other thing was at one time or another, all 3 of these artists were on Sub Pop, which was the home of grunge, or as good as. Although not all grunge bands are on Sub Pop, of course. I mean, the Pumpkins weren't, and neither were... Screaming Trees probably were as well. Anyway, but that's another. I might do a video on them actually. Right now, the artist that kick-started off this video was a guy called Shawn Smith. Now, Shawn Smith, to me, is one of the greatest voices of the 90s. He has such a soulful voice. And I'm not the only person to have noticed this. Back in, I don't know, when was it? Ages ago. Might even have been in the 90s, maybe later. But Mojo ran a feature called The 100 Greatest Vocalists of All Time. And nestling in at, I don't know whether it was number 100 or number 99 or something, was Shawn Smith. And I would rate him. I just rate his vote. I just rate him so much. The first time I came into contact with Shawn Smith was as a member of a band that Stone Gossard. I have to, because I always get Jeff Ament and Stone Gossard mixed up like an idiot. Anyway, Stone Gossard from Pearl Jam put together. He brought together a few people from sort of that northwest sphere, and one of these people was Shawn Smith. Now, he'd arrived in Seattle from Spokane in Washington, and the first thing I experienced them, well, they put together the band called Brad. Make sure I get the glare out. And this was the first thing that I heard him on. Now, this is a single called 20th Century, and it was a revelation, to be honest. I absolutely loved this song. It's kind of... It's not really that grungy, I guess. It's got that grungy background, but it's more to do with... I mean, I think it's Shawn Smith is running the show here. I know it's Stone Gossard put the band together, but it's obviously drawn from Shawn Smith's influences, because this is funky. This has got real funk guitars on it. It's a fantastic song. And it came from this album, which is Shame. Which one? There's Shawn Smith. I mean, he doesn't look like that anymore. But this is just a fantastic album. It's full of real soulful, funky stuff, but with those grungy guitars. Now, at the time, that was the catch for me. Not the catch, that was what brought me in. But it just made me appreciate his voice just so much. Now, the biggest influences on Shawn Smith are Freddie Mercury and Prince, and maybe a bit of Kiss as well, apparently. And you can really tell that on everything that he did. So you've got... So after this broke up, because this is only a side project for Gossard, and they all split up. He went back to Pearl Jam. But what happened was, one of the big producers at Sub Pop was Steve Fisk, and he's produced loads of successful and not so successful grunge bands. I think he had a hand in Nirvana at one point. I think he produced some of their early singles or something. I'd have to go and look it up because I've forgotten. But Shawn Smith hooked up with Steve Fisk and formed the band Pigeonhead. Now, this is their first album. I only got this recently. I don't know it as well as the other stuff, but it was a massive gap in my collection. So I thought, right, okay. And this is really funky. It is really good. Topped off with the fantastic vocals, but with a more dancey, almost kind of industrial type dance to it that Steve Fisk brought along. This was released in '93, so this was released in, I think, April '93, and at the same time Smith was working on this as well. So you got, this is great. Doesn't include their most famous song though, which I'll get to in a bit. Right, so Pigeonheads stopped working together, but what happened, some of the guys from Brad, including Regan Hagar, they decided that they hadn't finished working together, and they thought they'd form a new band, and that band was Satchel. Now, this is a lost masterpiece. This is a lost masterpiece. This is kind of a concept album built around Reservoir Dogs. Now, there's loads and loads of dialogue on here from the film. And in fact, a lot of the tracks, I mean, you've got tracks Mr. Brown, Mr. Pink, Mr. Blue. But this is just fantastic music. Yeah, it's quite a grungy album. Not quite, it's very grungy. But it's mixed in with the soulfulness of Smith. It's got funk bits on it. It's just a melange of, but in such, just the best possible mix of dance, funks, and grunge. So that's Satchel. Now, this was released in '94. Now, obviously, they'd gone away, and I think they might even have toured that album. I think they did. But when they came back in '96, they came back with this one, which is Satchel, The Family. Now, this is an entirely different beast. It's much more singer-songwritery, much more laid back, almost an Elton John vibe to it. Less funk, more soulful. I mean, the vocals Shawn Smith's vocals on this one is fantastic. Tracks on here, Isn't That Right, Without Love, Time of the Year. I could just listen to this till the cows come home. So much as I love this one, this one's even better. I just think this is incredible. So the year after that, I think they were going to keep going as a band, but what happened was Stone Gossard poked his nose back in and said, I know, let's make another album. So they came up with this one, which is Interiors. and it's more of the same from Brad. It is still superb alt rock, but with that funky twist. And then finally, Shawn Smith and Steve Fisk started working back together again, and got this one. So this is Pigeonhead's second album, second and last album, although apparently there is an unreleased third album somewhere. And this ups the Princeisms immensely. I mean, it is just a full-on tribute, really. And on here is now which track was it? Track Battle Flag was sampled by Low Fidelity All Stars in the early 2000s, and I think it was actually a hit. So you've probably heard Shawn Smith's vocals, even though you may not have realised. But this is another terrific album. I mean, Shawn Smith, and then sort of there was a bit of a gap, and then Brad came back sort of early. I think this was 2000. I think this one, and this is Welcome to Discovery Park. Now, if you pick up any of these albums, I can say that I would recommend any of them, to be honest. Shawn Smith didn't stop there. This is the only stuff I have physically by him, but he continued going. He now records solo, some fantastic solo albums. He's recorded he fronts a band that with Andrew Wood from Mother Love Bone's brother, who play different things written by Andrew Wood, including songs made from lost lyrics by Andrew Wood. What else does he play with? Oh, Brad and Satchel both reformed in the early 2010s. So he's just continuing to make music, and the good thing about it at the moment is if you go to Shawn Smith's Bandcamp page, you can actually download a load of his solo stuff for free, if you so wish. Of course, you can pay for it, and I would recommend getting a load of that as well. Just some beautiful, beautiful music. I just cannot recommend his, but I just love his vocals. He's got one of those voices that I hooked onto 25 years ago, and I have not stopped listening to him since. Right, now, second band I'm going to talk about here. There is a link between, not just a Sub Pop link, but there is a link between Shawn Smith and the next band. Now, the next band I'm going to talk about is the Afghan Whigs. They were formed in 1986 in Cincinnati by Greg Dully and some other people he met. I can't remember them. I should have written this down. Useless. And now I'm recording on my phone, so I can't look it up. But by Greg Dully and some people that he met. He was introduced as a guitarist, and they kind of hit it off over their love of soul music and their love of R&B, and also their love of guitar music. Now, Dully, when he was asked, said that what he wanted to achieve when he set the band up was he wanted to mix the band, the Temptations, and Neil Young playing with Crazy Horse all into one melting pot. And I think he certainly achieved that. I think it's amazing what he achieved with this band. And the first song they played together apparently was Psychedelic Shack by the Temptations, which is, well, I just think that's a masterpiece of a song. Right, now I don't have the first two Whigs albums. I have heard the second one, Up In It, which was on Sub Pop. Don't know if I've ever heard the first one, Big Time Halloween, I think it's called. But they were more of a straight-ahead guitar band. Now, the first time I encountered the Whigs was on this. Now, this is the Uptown Avondale EP. And on this, it's... there's only one... There was an album released at the time, but there's only one track from that, and that's a remix. And the remix is of a track on their third album called Miles Is Dead. And it's been retitled as Rebirth of the Cool, and it was mixed by Shawn Smith and Steve Fisk from Pigeonhead. So there's your link. On here you've got a load of soul covers, so you've got things like Band of Gold, Come See About Me by Diana Ross. Is that right? I think so. True Love Travels on a Gravel Road, Beware, and it's just, I mean, it is 90s soul music as sung by a white guy, but it's not plastic soul. It is him trying to be as soulful as he can, and to be honest, his voice is a limited instrument, but he wrings as much soul as he can out of it, and I think he does a brilliant job on this. So this piqued my interest, Something Chronic, and I eventually ended up getting this. Now this is their third album. This is called Congregation. The cover is apparently represents what the Whigs wanted to do with their music. It was a mix of black and white, so black soul, black funk, and white rock together, and this represents their almost manifesto on what they wanted to do. So many good songs on this. What's starting to appear on here is their bringing in soul and funk and R&B elements into their music. But the band is so incredibly tight. And I think that's possibly the greatest influence they got from soul and R&B. All those great soul and R&B bands are just so tight. So the music is just, each part fits into a jigsaw puzzle, and it is just so tight. Now I love loose music as well, but that's one of the things I love about soul and R&B is each component is just part of a greater whole, and it's just fits like a glove. Here they're starting to incorporate those, but even then the sound is so tight, the guitars so piercing, so tight, the bass is just on spot, and the drums are great. But what's starting to come out with this album is, well, let's just say, I would never want to have been Greg Dully in the 90s. I mean, the self-revulsion, the loathing, it's just unbelievable. I mean, this album isn't quite as bad. There's a lot of sort of anti-Christian evangelical songs on here. There's a lot of relationship songs, and it's always when things have gone wrong he seems to be writing from. So that there's a lot of self-deprecation. There's a lot of bordering on misogyny. I mean, but it draws back because he obviously loves women, but I think in the lyrics he comes off as such an arsehole that he just can't help himself from this. And to be honest, this one and this one, the follow-up, which was Gentleman, which is a fantastic album musically, but lyrically, after you come away from this, you feel so dirty. I mean, he hated himself from this. I mean, he knew what he was doing. He's obviously, I mean, I would hope that some of this isn't as autobiographical as I think it is, because it's just a mass of failed relationships, self-loathing, hatred, lies, drug use. I mean, you feel filthy after you've listened. You know, if you really listen to the lyrics, you feel absolutely filthy after this. But it is still a fantastic album. The music is just absolutely brilliant, and in a way, the music lifts the despondency of the lyrics, because the guitars are ringing, the guitars are fantastic. The music is grungy, but there is a definite funkiness to it. I mean, and what they do on here is they bring other instruments in. There's also another vocalist on one of the tracks, because there's a song that apparently Greg Dully wrote that was too painful for him to sing, so he got Marcy Mays from the band Scrawl to sing it. The bass just adds, it's ominous in places. It's you've got the guitars on one level ringing out, you've got Greg Dully going on about the depravity that he was going through, and then you've got the bass which just has an ominous loom to it in places. Just an incredible album, just brilliant. And now they couldn't keep that up. I mean, Gentleman is just a fantastic record, but this is still good. And this is their fifth album. By this time, Gentleman was on Elektra, I think they've moved. Is it on Elektra? Yeah, on Elektra. So they've moved to a major label by here. Now this is still good. I mean, this is even more moving towards the funkiness of it. Just some great I mean, you can see they look like a bunch of dudes. That's Dolly, I think. Is that Dolly? Maybe it's that one. I don't know, one of the two. Probably him, actually, I don't know. Anyway, just fantastic stuff. More of the same lyrically. And this is Black Love. I really can't recommend the Whigs more enough. I mean, they did release one more. Oh, I'll go through this now. And this was a single off it. This was Going to Town, which is another great song by them. And it's got a version of Moon River on here, which I think is a lovely reading of it. They did release one more album called 1965, and I think it was out in 96, and then they split, and then they said they'd never record again. Yeah, whatever. We know better than that now. So this decade, they've released 2 more albums, and I recommend both of them. They've both got absolutely brilliant songs on. He's not so hard on himself. I think he's reconciled himself a lot. And he seems to have come out the other side of it a bit. But I thoroughly... And they're probably even more funky now. Go and check them out, because they're absolutely fantastic band. Right, so that's the second band, Whistle Stop Tour. I've already spent 20 minutes. I might as well make this another half-hour video. Right, the third band, also on Sub Pop, and also went to a major label, are a band I've talked about before, especially one of their albums, which you'll see. People who watch my videos often will see that I've shown one out of these albums at least 3 or 4 times already. The band is Big Chief. Now, this was their debut album, and this is called Face. Now, this is a pretty standard, in one way it's a pretty standard grunge album. You've got the big chunky guitars, you've got the loud quiet thing going on. But there is definitely funky elements coming out of this. It is not just a straight ahead grunge record. Obviously, I don't think on this record they could help themselves. They come from Ann Arbor, which is in Michigan, which is where Iggy came from. Pretty sure it came from Ann Arbor. And they definitely had aspects of that Detroit late 60s, 70s sound from the Stooges, the MC5, where it's not just straight rock or grunge, but they've obviously got parts. They've been listening to Blaxploitation. They've been listening to, I don't know, Curtis Mayfield. Not Curtis Mayfield so much, but definitely Funkadelic and that kind of thing. And although it doesn't really come together on this album, there's elements of it in here. But where it does come together, and they add even more influences to the melting pot, is this album. And I've shown this loads. It's one of my top 5 albums of all time. It's Mac Avenue Skull Game by Big Chief. Released in, I think it was 93. I could go on about this album for hours. Honestly. Absolutely hours. It is, I've mentioned it before, but for people who haven't watched any of my other videos, it's the imaginary soundtrack to a movie about a pimp called Mac Avenue and a prostitute called Sonica, and it's all about their relationship and how Sonica eventually gets things together and she dumps Mac at Mac, and he gets caught by the police, and Sonica walks away from him, and so ends this film. I wish somebody would make a film out of this, because I think it would be an amazing film. But you don't just get the funk and the grunge on here. You get soul, you get punk, you get R&B. It's just an absolute melting pot of a record, and it is just greater than the sum of its parts, and nobody knows this record. I just wish somebody else would say, oh, I've listened to that, or at least I've listened to it, even if they don't like it. I just think this is a phenomenal record. This is my copy from Japan. I bought this I probably I think I might even have shown this CD before. I'm not sure. But they didn't sell very much. Even during '93, you know, Nirvana had already made it big. They didn't sell very much. But for some reason, they ended up on Columbia. Columbia signed them. But before that, they put this out. And this is a German pressing of this. It's a Big Chief product. And it's kind of like a mix. You've got some tracks off singles, you've got some remixes from Mac Avenue, you've got, yeah, it's basically a sort of an extended single, maybe mini album. But they up the funk on some of these, and the drumming gets double funky, and I just love it. So that's product. And then on Columbia in '94, they released this one. This is Platinum Jive. Now this again is an imaginary album. This is an imaginary greatest hits album. And what I like about this is, I mean, it is really good. It's another good album. Not as good as Mac Avenue, but it's another really good album. And on here you get, like, I mean, they've gone to the trouble of actually making all the original albums up. I mean, you know, you've got an 8-track there. I just think it's brilliant. There you go, there's another. And each of these songs apparently comes from different albums, but there's that overall 70s funk feel to them mixed with the grunge guitars, and I just love the sound of Big Chief. After that album they split up, unfortunately. But there is one more bit of the story. One of the members on Mac Avenue and on Platinum Jive, they got in a backing singer called Thornetta Davis, and in 1996 she released this album on Sub Pop, and it's basically Big Chief without the lead vocalist backing Thornetta Davis, and this is one of the great lost albums. I think this is a fantastic album. It's soulful, it's gritty, it lays down a lot of kind of, if you've ever heard of a band called the Bell Rays, or even what's that band? I can't remember that band that came recently. Oh, useless memory. But this is just a fantastic album. Some of it's sweet pop music, sweet soul music. Some of it's heavier. I mean, one of these songs, Sunday Morning, just crying out for someone to cover it, because it is such a beautiful song. Beautiful, beautiful song. Go on YouTube that if you've never heard it. I just love it. So there we go. 3 bands joined by one label and one kind of almost, it could have been a movement. I'm surprised somebody in the media didn't label this grunge soul movement and try and lump these bands together. Well, I suppose that's what British music journalists were always trying to do. Maybe they didn't do it in America, I don't know. But I can heartily recommend all 3 of those artists. This video ties into another kind of thread that's been going, not only the 90s thread, but also the bands you just don't hear about on the VC. I've never heard of Shawn Smith on the VC, and I've never heard of Afghan Whigs on VC. I'm no damn sure I'm the only person who's talked about Big Chief. So there we go. I hope you found something interesting about those 3 bands. I hope it's maybe, I mean, some of you must know about the Whigs, some of you must know about Shawn Smith, but I would just say to those people who don't, go and find out about them, because they're 3 brilliant, brilliant bands, bringing in that sweet funky music. Okay, so thanks VC. I've been planning this for a while. I hope I got my love of these bands across. And I'll see you again soon. So cheers VC. Bye.